Welcome back to the crypto simulation. I'm the Gaussian Snake. Tonight I'm going to talk to you about Bitcoin. Be sure to join my free Telegram group at the Snake Pit to join about 175 other members who love talking about crypto, and we drop lots of alpha there, have some great conversations, and we'd love to have you there. So there's a link in the description below. This is a logarithmic regression analysis of Bitcoin fit to 3 standard deviations in increments of 0.5 from this orange mean line. And you can see that right now Bitcoin is currently at the 0.5 line fighting for support. And you know what? These down wicks have been getting bought up very nicely on the 2 weeks. So that is a sign of some strength from Bitcoin. The big question is, with all this economic data coming out this week, what should we expect from Bitcoin? Should we expect another move up or a move down? Keep in mind that we have had 7 green months in a row for Bitcoin. I know that's not visible here on the chart, but you can kind of clump the greens together, and this little red wasn't really much of a red. This is on the 2 week, so these are green months in increments of 2, of course. So what should we expect this week? I mean, we have the halving coming up very, very soon. So everything seems really bullish for Bitcoin, even though we've been having a little bit of price weakness recently. So let's take a look and find out. This is Bitcoin dominance, also on the 2 week. And you'll see that it has been holding its 40-week SMA for quite some time. And not only that, but it broke through in September of last year. This would be the 200-week SMA. So it's above its 200-week and it's above its 20-week. It's also above its 100-week, which is down here. And overhead looms the ever-present 400-week. And the 400-week is trending down. And I would imagine that the 400-week would act as a type of resistance for Bitcoin dominance, most likely, as it makes its way down here. So right now, Bitcoin dominance does still look bullish. But you would notice here that the 40-week is starting to curl in a concave down way. And so I think you can see kind of how this almost looks like a distribution phase, although one could argue it also is a flag. But I'm thinking whatever Bitcoin does soon, whether it breaks to the upside or breaks to the downside, we'll probably see an increase in Bitcoin dominance, at least temporarily, as Bitcoin dominance perhaps searches for some kind of top for this cycle before maybe it heads down for a little while. And that doesn't mean that it's done. Far from it. Bitcoin dominance will get bounces along the way, but Bitcoin dominance has been in a bull market for quite a long time. We can switch this over to a 1 week time frame so you can see this even more clearly. So on the 1 week, you can see the 20 week now. That's what the yellow would be. And this is the 50 week in blue, the 100 week in white, and the 200 week in red. And so Bitcoin dominance is above all of its key moving averages, which is a bullish sign. So how much gas does it have left in the tank? Well, nobody really knows. But we did see kind of a dip here in the January-February timeframe. We saw another brief dip in August-September. So the more you dip under this, the more likely it is to break. So my estimation is that Bitcoin dominance doesn't have a lot of time left to run, but it still could have another month or two of gas left in the tank to the upside. Bitcoin on the weekly is just off the charts, no pun intended. So you can see this is the 20-week SMA, the 50-week SMA, both are turned up, looking really strong. This is the 100-week, which is still below the 200-week, but you can see that the 100-week is about to form a golden cross, probably this month, potentially, maybe May at the latest, but you can see how this is starting to curl up rapidly. And at that point, Bitcoin will actually have all of its moving averages stacked up. Typically, when that happens, we see parabolic movement out of Bitcoin. So this is something just to kind of keep in mind, that is typically what does happen. So we do need to look at some indicators to see kind of where we're at with Bitcoin. But so far, everything looks pretty bullish on these higher time frames. So this is the RSI and stochastic RSI on the weekly time frame for Bitcoin. And you can see that we reached a peak RSI value on March 4th, and then we had a lower high on March 25th, and now we're coming down to the 80 line. The stochastic RSI is turned down, but of course it is starting to turn the other way, which means that our price movement to the downside is getting stalled out a little bit. and we're actually seeing a little bit of price movement to the upside. So what happens next? Well, you can't tell necessarily from here, but overall, the market structure does remain bullish. And you can see in previous cycles, once we get up above 80, like we did in 2020 and 2021, we tend to, the stochastic RSI tends to stay up there for quite a while, and you can get readings up in this area happening for quite some time, which it has already done. So that's just something to keep in mind, that we are still at some pretty high levels for RSI and stochastic. In fact, we hit near maximum levels on March 4th, and we also hit it in December 4th, and actually I take that back, November 27th and December 4th. This didn't go down that much. So that's one data point we can look at to say that things have been pretty bullish and pretty hot. Let's see if we could look at some other indicators to get some other clues. Now, if we look at the bull bear power trend, you can see that the bulls are still very much in control, although it looks like on the power trend we've carved out maybe like a little bit of a head and shoulders pattern. And these kinds of patterns even play out on indicators. Like you can see a little head and shoulders pattern right here. So this may indicate, just like we've been putting in lower highs, that while the bulls are in control, maybe they're just starting to lose their grip a little bit on a weekly time frame. The average true range for Bitcoin has started to pick up considerably this month, and this is a measure of increasing volatility, and it doesn't have to necessarily be to the upside, it could also be to the downside. But we are seeing an increase in volatility, although nothing quite like what you would expect during previous parabolic phases. But this is definitely a bullish sign, because most of this volatility has been upward momentum. The average directional index, or ADX, appears to have topped out around 70, which is a very strong trend strength. We're still in that range. You can see that the green DI peaked out here around 51 and has dropped pretty precipitously, and looks like it's still dropping, and so this is a little bit bearish. Now we could see a bounce come out of this, but I would expect this to continue to perhaps move a little bit to the downside. I don't know if this will be a sustained downside movement. Usually when this peaks and the green DI peaks, it is pretty much sustained downside movement for the ADX. It does not mean price won't go up, because anytime we get a bounce, price goes up. But as you can see, once the ADX peaks, typically that's the end of that bullish movement. Now there are some exceptions to this. As you can see, throughout 2017 and 2016, we had some weekly peaks, and that wasn't the end of it. So I would caution you to draw any definitive conclusions from this. Even if we did come down on the ADX in the coming months, that might just indicate that Bitcoin's entering into some kind of accumulation range before a move higher. I would like to look at this indicator on a higher time frame. So if we extrapolate this ADX and DI out to a higher time frame, you can see that when the ADX peaks and green DI peaks, that typically is the end of your extremely strong bullish momentum. And I've drawn this trend line for ADX. It went above the trend line in the 2017 cycle, but it's respected this trend line in the 2013 cycle and also the 2021 bull cycle. You can see that we are far below here. So what this suggests is we've still got quite a bit of bullish momentum left if we are to tap this trend line. And if you were to adjust this trend line to just account for peaks in green DI, it would seem like we probably are going to look something like this, and maybe ladder our way up over the coming months to this yellow trend line, which would represent the peak bullish ADX momentum, or peak bullish directional index momentum. So all this is saying to me is that there is still potential upside for Bitcoin during this cycle that hasn't been realized yet. But the bulk of the move probably has been realized on the way up here, because once you start trending down, as you can see here in March 2021, you can get bounces along the way, which are pretty significant. I mean, that led to a lower high, but typically once you start heading down, that's pretty much it. Once you've reached this trend line. So we still have a little ways to go before we hit that trend line. So I don't think we're in any imminent danger of our cycle burning out. The Gaussian filter MACD has almost printed a trigger sell on the weekly. So when you see the green and the white start to head down in a parallel channel, that's often a sign of price weakness. But what could also happen is what happened back here in 2020 heading into 2021, where you find a kind of higher low, and then you go up from there. It happened also later on that year as well. This was a higher low in November relative to August, but overall these were lower highs. So we have gotten pretty high up, but that's not unusual. And even if you revisit past cycles, of course, the scale of the moves has changed. You can see that these patterns can build for a while. So this is very likely not the last run up. Most likely we're going to have another one. Let's take a look at this indicator on a higher time frame. I mean, looking at this on a higher time frame, this is the monthly time frame. Bitcoin's just going straight up. I mean, the last bit of weakness occurred in October, September, and it's just been up ever since. And we should expect to surpass the momentum from 2021 cycle. In fact, this is a inverse head and shoulders. So I would expect us to see some continued upward movements, which suggests to me, and it's really hard to form these conclusions on a higher time frame, but should these parallel channels continue with strength, we wouldn't expect to see much of a pullback. Now, this could form a high, here if the monthly time frame catches up with the weekly. Because if we go to the lower time frames, you can get some clues, maybe like even on the 5-day, we've already started heading down. So we could see this play out on the monthly if we get a red April, which seems to be the most likely statistically because of the fact that we had 7 green months in a row, but nothing is for certain. But this is telling that on the 5-day, we've really started to turn down. And if we go to the 3-day, I mean, look at how far down we've gone, although we are starting to kink here. What about the 1-day? What does that look like? 1-day GF MACD is about to print a trigger long signal. So even though the 5-day and the 3-day time frames are still in trigger sell, you can see that we are actually about to print a trigger long, meaning that upward price action is probably likely in the coming days. But is it going to be sustained? That is a hard question to answer. I would think that we just end up printing another lower high, but anything's possible. We could break through this trend. So this is something definitely that we got to keep a watch on. What's happening on the 12-hour? 12-hour we've already crossed and we're heading up. What about on the 6-hour? On the 6-hour, we formed a cup and handle. So, I don't know if this behavior will necessarily carry over to the higher time frames, but it's looking pretty bullish right now for this coming week, at least from the charts. This is the parabolic SAR. As you can see, the parabolic SAR top dot is at $51,536. So we would have to actually crash below that to invalidate the current uptrend, according to the parabolic SAR, and start printing some of these dots for a downtrend. That has not happened yet, but that is something to consider. Now the parabolic SAR on the daily time frame is around $70,329, and right now we're sitting at $69,429. So if we were to break through $70,329, that would start a new parabolic uptrend for Bitcoin. That's not guaranteed to happen, but that is just how these things work. So once you crash through one of these dots, then you start, forming dots underneath for bullishness. Dots above are bearish. So it can be hard to find signs of bearishness. You see all these wicks on the weekly just being bought up one after another. But pay attention to these moving averages. These are not simple moving averages. These are whole moving averages, or HMAs, and I found them to be a less lagging indicator for Bitcoin and for other assets. So as you can see, we have pretty much been able to stay above the 20 and the 10 week at HMA for quite some time. We did fall through it in March, and we've been underneath the 10 HMA ever since. We've been trying to hold the 20 as support, and it looks like we are barely doing that right now, heading into this next week. But if we were to fall through, the next logical stop would be the 50, which is currently sitting around $58,000, which also happens to be a significant Fibonacci level for Bitcoin. And we can pull those up after we're done analyzing this. So, and if for some reason we weren't able to hold that, then we have the 100-week HMA sitting at around 48K. So it's about as low as we could possibly get. We have touched the 50 as in February. That was 42,435. So it does look to me, we're heading like straight horizontal here. So the odds, especially with this curling over, odds are we're going to go down for a little while. So the HMA ribbon suggests to me that further downside from Bitcoin is in the cards for this month and possibly even the month after. But let's take this 1 week at a time, okay? Seeing this 10 curl over like this, when was the last time that happened? You can see that happened as we were really fighting that in October, and we stayed below it throughout December. This is, of course, a weekly time frame, but you can see we kind of rolled our way into January. But when we were really bullish, October heading into November, we got above this 10-week HMA. So the HMA can kind of give you some preview of what your price might be facing. Let's take a look at this on a lower time frame. Yeah, there are some bearish signals here for sure. You can see that we peaked out on March 14th and then fell to, looks like, around 60K. It was on March 20th, and then we tried to come back up. We got rejected off of, this would be the 50-day HMA, and then came back down, put in a higher low, which is a good sign. It's usually a bullish sign when that happens. And now we're fighting to get back above these HMAs. Now, notice that the 100-day HMA is starting to roll over at around 74K. So one possibility for what might happen is that Bitcoin might rocket off and put in a slightly higher high around the halving, okay? But that's not going to change the fact that this 100-week or 100-day HMA is starting to roll over. And so we could get thrust right into a correction, a longer correction, if that were to happen. That is a possibility, and that's what this chart kind of looks like. Look at how the 10-day is starting to curl back up again, which is bullish. Look how the 20-day is starting to curl back up. It looks like we got rejected off of the 50-day, but that's also kind of flattening out. So, we could see, and of course a lot of this will depend on what the economic data looks like as well next week, but markets have a way of trying to sniff out economic data. And if the markets are right, then I would expect this to turn bullish, and we could very well retest our high from March and maybe even put in a slightly higher high, which would confuse a lot of people. But, this 100-day HMA curling down like this makes me think that we have some more bearish prevailing momentum that may keep Bitcoin suppressed for some time to come. Looking at this a different way, you can see that the daily Bollinger Bands are starting to squeeze a little bit tighter. Ever since we got to our all-time high, we've just been kind of consolidating. And the top of this Bollinger Band right now is around 72. The bottom of this Bollinger Band is around 65. So that's been kind of our range that we've been oscillating in on the daily. And this does look like it's getting ready to break out soon, right? So when the Bollinger Bands start to squeeze, that's usually a sign. What does this look like on higher time frames? On the weekly time frame, you can see that we have stayed well above the median line of the Bollinger Band, which sits around 55K. The upper portion is around 86K, and the lower portion is around 36K. So there's quite a bit of variation here. We have been very bullish, though. It's a bull market. So this median line has held as support, and it may continue to hold as support. Now, what I can't tell is if this is starting to kind of roll over a little bit. But even if it did roll over, it would take a little while for this to roll down. If that were to happen, we'd have to see price moving down. So the Bollinger Bands are not squeezing. So that is something to keep in mind. So it's possible that we just kind of go sideways straight into the median line and then get our next, at that point we could get our next move up for all we know. That's a possibility, right? So you could imagine a situation where, maybe you get something kind of like this extending out, and you have your price sort of like slam right into this, and that would be some very boring price movement heading into the end of the month. And then from there, who knows what happens? Like, it could fall through for all we know, and go underneath it for a little while. But that would keep price a little more elevated than some people expect. Like, I was even thinking, 45 to 50K could be a good bottoming range, but I don't know that we'll get that far down, right? We've just been going straight sideways, and these wicks being bought up is telling me that there's a lot of buying pressure in this region, in the in the upper 50s to lower to mid 60s. Because if there wasn't, you wouldn't keep seeing these down wicks. You would see a little bit more weakness, and we're just not seeing that yet. Now I want to just illustrate to you. What happens as we reduce the time frames down. So if we go from the weekly to the 5-day, you'll see that the Bollinger Bands are starting to constrict. If we go from the 5-day to the 3-day, you'll see they're starting to constrict even more. If we go from the 3-day to the 2-day, they are tight. I mean, this is typically, you can see what I'm getting at. It looks like some kind of big movement on a lower time frame is coming soon. But if you look on the higher time frames, it may not mean a whole lot. Okay, it could be a drop or it could be a move up. But these Bollinger Bands are not tight on the weekly time frame. And if you go to the 2-week, you'll see that the Bollinger Bands are not tight at all, right? So to see them tight, you have to kind of get to lower time frames. And what is, so if we're constricted at the daily, we can only imagine what like the 18-hour looks like. Let's go to the 18-hour. Even more constricted. Are there any signs of a breakout happening on any time frame? 12-hour? Nope. What about the 9-hour? Even tighter. What about the 6-hour? Even tighter. What about the 4-hour? Even tighter. How about the 1-hour? We're starting to see signs of this opening up. Okay. But how is it opening? And it looks like it's opening to the upside. See how these were tight and it started to open to the upside. So that's a potential clue that we have more upward price movement in the near future. That is not guaranteed to be sustained, but this is at least what the time frames are telling me. I mean, these are really, really low time frames. 15-minute, it's tight, right? There's just a lot of tightness on all time frames suggesting a big move is coming. The hourly may be providing clues, but I wouldn't rely on it because every other time frame is just so constricted. Okay, let's look at the MACD on the monthly. And you can see, just looking down here, that in March, we did start to go in a concave down way on the blue line. On the signal line, on the other hand, so this is the difference of the 26-month and the 12-month SMA for, again, this is the monthly time frame, and this is the signal line. You can see that things tend to start looking bearish when this starts to roll over. We have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 green months in a row of MACD. And you can see this in the chart by this green curve just going straight up. And you can also see how these lines are about as far away as possible. So right now, everything looks really, really bullish on the monthly time frame. But the question is, are we going to get a red month in April? And how significant will it be if it is red? So here we are on a weekly time frame, and you can see by the fact that this is orange that price is above, right? Price is above this orange line, meaning that we have a bullish situation for MACD. And so you can see that the signal line is below the MACD line, but the MACD line is starting to curl in a little bit. And you can also see that right now, so far this week, we have been printing light green. And in fact, we have crossed over the green line, indicating that this could shift to red pretty soon. It hasn't yet, but it could, as it's done in the past. So this is something we do need to keep to watch. For the MACD to continue rising above, and we would need to close the week above 66,645. Across below the EMA signal line, where that's where this crosses below, we're far away from that. I wouldn't even consider that. Let's see what this is saying on a daily time frame. So on a daily time frame, you can see that we are printing light red, but that is generally a good thing, right? So this is a good thing to cross above the EMA signal line, which looks like we're actually about to do. Look at that price, 75K. So if we can somehow turn this green near the halving, we might see a new all-time high out of Bitcoin of 75K. That does not mean that Bitcoin closes the month green, because the halving is a little over halfway through the month. There's still time left for that to flip red, but it would reduce the chances that we do get a red month, and we could end up with an 8th green month in a row, which would make it almost a lock that May would be red. That would be a record number of green months. But it could happen. It could happen. We are trending below the blue line, which is generally bearish and corresponds to the histogram being below the 0 line, but we could see this certainly shift around this week. It looks like that is the most likely scenario, is that this will flip bullish, at least for a little while. One potentially bearish signal is the daily Gaussian ribbon. Daily Gaussian ribbon is starting to squeeze really tight. Now, on the daily, this can just open right back up. But this does sort of warrant an investigation on higher time frames. So let's move a little bit higher to like a 3-day time frame. No issues there. It's fat as can be. Let's move to the weekly time frame. Extremely fat. Okay, so I get more concerned about these narrowing and closing if we're on a higher time frame and that happens. On a lower time frame, I don't really worry too much. As you can see, it's the higher time frames that matter more for the Gaussian ribbon. But the squeeze on the shorter time frame can certainly carry over to the higher one. So it's just something to keep in mind. This is the Lux Algo supply and demand analysis, and this is on the weekly time frame. The blue, gray, and orange regions can indicate areas of significant support and resistance. And you can see that we're not far away from resistance at our, brand new all-time high. So it would be a little unusual to just blast right through this after, the first attempt failed, to just like go straight up to like 85K or something on the second attempt. So we can expect to spend some time in this blue region. Unfortunately, this indicator does not work on a logarithmic scale, but just to kind of show you, if we go all the way back to 2012, you can see how significant $20,000 was as first an area of resistance and then later as an area of support. And, you can see now kind of how around 74K is an area of resistance. And this is kind of the volume, or you can think of it as time spent at certain prices, and you can see it fattens out all the way from 20K on up. I think it's very unlikely that Bitcoin ever revisits 20K again or gets anywhere even near it. But this will be interesting to see kind of how it plays out. And the Lux Algo changes, of course, the closer in you get to the current prices. So I felt it was logical to go from peak to peak. And so you can see that we have the maximum volume kind of in this area around 52K. We got like a little wall of volume all the way up to 58K, which also again happens to be an important fib level. And then if all else fails and we drop out of the box, we've got 45K acting as a very significant level of support. So we've got support below. And this is leading me to believe that getting down to like 45 to 50K could be a very difficult journey if it happens at all. So we could very, very well stay within this blue box in a hypothetical accumulation range that materializes either before the halving or after the halving. But, basically Bitcoin's next journey, I think, is to try to digest this all-time high move, which it may get another crack at around the halving. And then it's just going to have to spend time digesting it, which is where you'll see some sell-offs potentially materialize. Something also interesting to note is that we have not triggered the Pi cycle top. We triggered it in April of 2021. We triggered it, it looks like December 17. This is on the weekly time frame. This is the reverse Pi cycle top indicator, December 13 and April 13. The red is the triggering of it. So we have yet to trigger this Pi cycle top. So we're a long ways away from that. Again, this is the reverse Pi cycle top indicator. So that should tell you that if the Pi cycle top is to be trusted as a topping indicator, that we've still got a long ways to go before we reach our cycle's all-time high, and that 75K, 74K, whatever, is probably going to just serve as an intermediate top at worst for a little while. Returning to our fibs, we can see that the 1.0 fib has been an area of significant resistance. We've just been kind of straddling it. It's been encouraging to see these down wicks getting bought up, and there is a possibility we do get above it in this month. We could see, like I said, we could see a green April. It's possible. Should we see further downside, I imagine that 58,000 will provide some area of support You can see there's quite a bit of volume building out though, right here at this level at 68K. Like, it's starting to stick out and act as support because of all this downwick activity. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, upside potential certainly looks like it exists. And it's such a hard read that we really need to see, well, how much upside potential is there actually for Bitcoin? So I'm actually going to go over to Polarity Digital and look at their risk metrics and see what the upside down potential indicators over there are saying, which could give us a better read of how much upside potential Bitcoin has left, not only for a short term, but also for the cycle. So exactly what I just saw in the charts, I'm seeing confirmation here. The upside down potential indicator short, which is more focused on Bitcoin's upside potential in the short term, has reset all the way to negative 1.36, suggesting that Bitcoin has room to move up if it wants to. It's cooled off enough with this sideways consolidation that it very well could have another move up in the short term. The medium UDPI is 0.82. So 0.82 indicates a rather neutral reading, but saying that medium term Bitcoin is a little bit overheated and may need some cooling off. Bitcoin's long-term UDPI is at 2.34. I mean, Solana's at 2.67 for reference, but that gives you an idea of how overheated Bitcoin is on the long term. And this is saying, hey guys, a cool off is needed. Like, a longer cool off is needed. Because if this thing continues to rise and get into like the 3s and the 4s, then we're potentially staring at a market cycle top. We don't want to see that right now. It's just too early. So we would like to see the UDPI long start to cool off. And so we could take a look at what some of the other risk indicators are saying by just kind of scrolling over. And the TCI, or trend confidence indicator, is at negative 0.34, which is a fairly neutral reading, but it indicates that downside is more likely than upside. That's kind of the general read, but not by much. The probability is for more downside, but again, not convincingly so. At negative 0.34 is a fairly low TCI. It's a fairly unconvincing TCI level. The momentum bias indicator, or MBI, is reading 0.24, which is only slightly convincing that Bitcoin is likely to continue its bullish momentum. We did notice that, right? We noticed that Bitcoin looks like it could potentially put in a strong upward move in the near future, followed most likely by a significant drop. The forecast model is at 0.66. This means that there is a 66% chance, only a 66% chance, that Bitcoin's price will be where it's at now or higher 6 months from now. So what's 6 months from now? That's October. So it's only giving it a 2 out of 3 chance. So there is a possibility that Bitcoin's price, a 34% chance that this Bitcoin's price is actually lower than where it is today. Whereas something like Solana has an 88% chance of being higher. XRP even a 75% chance. Let's go look at Polygon just out of curiosity. 81% chance. So Bitcoin is kind of reading a little bit lower on the forecast model. Now the forecast model is dynamic. If we click on it, you can see that it does update with respect to time, but it is trending down and it looks bearish. So what does this seem to suggest? Well, we could get another move back up. That could certainly happen. I mean, look at this, happened in 2017, but this could also drop pretty significantly as well. So that is an interesting data point to look at, the fact that, this happened, but this already happened previously in September of 2023. So again, we could see another move to the upside. Just because it's at 66% now doesn't mean anything a week or two from now, but we'll have to definitely follow this to see what the data is telling us. I really appreciate this indicator. This is the Trix bubble. When I look at the Trix bubble, it looks bearish. It just looks bearish, like period. We have the this would be the weekly, so the 5-week SMA. It's just going straight down and everything else is curling with it. So this indicator, it's just one of my favorites. It is giving me some indication that this coming week is quite likely to be bearish, right? Now, this can be invalidated. As you can see, you could kink upwards. It happens sometimes. your most likely situation is not what plays out. But if we zoom in on it, everything's starting to roll over. So the odds are in favor of bearishness. They are leaning a little bit more in that direction. Traders dynamic alerts also printed a sell signal. Usually when that's printed, this was printed on March 18th, we do see a period of downside in the near future. And you can kind of go back and see these sell signals. Usually were followed up by some weakness, although not always. Okay, these are buy signals during the bear market. And these are some sell signals that usually were followed by some periods of weakness. So this is telling us, kind of like what the MBI was telling us, the momentum bias indicator, we're more likely to see weakness than we are to see strength. The oscillator volume profile, MFI oscillator, continues to print lower low after lower low, taking us more into the oversold direction. We are now at a reading of only 55. So while we could see a bounce up, the overall trend is down. And that's usually what happens. We got all the way up here to overbought in December, and we've just been trending down ever since with bounces along the way. So again, I'm anticipating a period of sustained sideways movement or weakness for Bitcoin coming. You've seen in my previous videos, I've talked about 45 to 50K as a floor. That might be a little too aggressive, but I'm not changing my mind. I said what I said. Let's see if it plays out. It does seem a little low, honestly. I'd like to kind of see what happens around 58K first, but I made a call and I got to stick with it and reflect on it later if it doesn't happen. But yeah, we're heading in the wrong direction, bearish. 3D wave trend is also looking a little bit bearish. You can see that we printed the most oversold on March 11th, and we've just been getting less and less oversold ever since. Overbought, max overbought. And looks like we're getting less and less overbought by the week. We could see another period of bearish momentum similar to what happened in January enter in soon. This trend magic tool shows you where the current uptrend would be invalidated. According to this tool, around 57K. So again, that fib level, right? That was at 58K. So price is usually drawn to this level unless it gets like another parabolic move up or something, then this will go up along with it. But the longer it stays flat, the higher the probability is that we come back and test it. So I would at the very least expect that we could test like 58K if this trend continues down. This is Bitcoin supply and profit versus supply and loss. And you can see we are pretty much maxed out at supply and profit. So another indicator that's looking bearish. These are Kelchner channels, which are similar to Bollinger Bands. And you can see that when we do penetrate the upper region of a Kelchner channel, we do tend to revert back to the median. The last time this happened was in August and September, and we did test it in January. So if we were to come down and test it again in April, that level would probably be somewhere around 58K, which corresponds to that fib that we were talking about earlier. This is the wave trend oscillator, and you can see it is just maxed out. We're printing a red dot, which is bearish. And in the past, when you get to these high levels, which it's been a while, honestly, here's January 2021 and March 2021, this tends to trend down. I'm telling you, we're seeing a lot of confirmation on different indicators that a downtrend, a sustained downtrend, is very likely. I feel like I've seen enough to make a diagnosis and a prediction for Bitcoin price. Even if we see a short-term bounce into next week, I think it will be very short-lived. I don't think it will be sustained. I think that you could see strength going into the, all the economic data. And at the first sign of bearishness from economic data, which there's a high chance of, right? I think you could see a pretty nice sell-off from Bitcoin. I am anticipating that $58,000 is going to serve, and not exactly that price, but around there, that fib level that we were, I think it was a 0.886 fib. It was around 58 something. Go back and you can see exactly where. I believe that that is going to serve as a significant area of support for Bitcoin. Will that be the lowest that Bitcoin goes? That I do not know. I still think that the 45 to 50K region is a possibility. I'm leaning more towards the upside of that region, around 50K, than I am the downside of that region. It doesn't have to play out all at once, right? We could have a multiple month correction. We could have a 2-month correction. It's possible. But I do think that 58K will provide support should Bitcoin get a nice sell-off. And we, of course, have to take a look at what's happening with supply and profit and loss and MFI oscillation and all that stuff to see when Bitcoin starts to get, oversold. So we're going from overbought to oversold. We're very overbought. We're maxed out still on a lot of indicators. And I feel like what you're seeing happen here is Bitcoin is starting to roll over. So I would say if we do get a green week, the short-term UDPI was suggesting that we could see some upside in the short term. We could go green straight into halving, but that would just probably mean the correction is going to be that much more painful when it truly hits. So I am still of the opinion that we are leaning more bearish than we are bullish, and that Bitcoin is going to begin the process of finding a floor and finding a range to chop around in. I don't think that this is the range right here. I think that's quite unlikely. I think we're going to need to see a larger consolidation range to build out a base for our next move higher whenever and should that ever occur. I think it is highly likely to occur, but I don't think it's highly likely to occur now, although I do think there's a possibility we test the high once again. I think it'll fail. So those are my thoughts about Bitcoin. And let's wait for some of the economic data to come out this week and we can analyze it in a future video. I'll talk about it in my Telegram group before I do the video on it though, because I usually do alerts every single day. And again, you're encouraged to join that. It is free. It is the Snek Pit, SNEK. I have a link to it in my video description and also in my bio. Be sure to check out all the links there in my description. I've got a lot of things going on, a lot of projects. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and also hit that notification bell to be notified of future videos. I am the Gaussian Snake, and I aim to provide you with the most comprehensive and rich and detailed analysis possible so that you can make up your own mind. Nothing in this video is financial advice. Let me be clear on that. All price predictions are for entertainment purposes only, but you are encouraged to use all the data from this video to help form your own conclusions about what Bitcoin is likely to do. And let me be clear, if Bitcoin drops, I expect dominance to go up, and I think dominance will end its bull market most likely on a Bitcoin dump. So I think dominance may continue to rise. We would expect altcoins to have some pain during that time, so please be patient with your altcoin holdings during the month of April and possibly May as well. Things are expected on my end, I think, to become pretty volatile. So that's all I have to say for now. I look forward to journeying through the halving with you, and let's come back and see how well this video ages later. In the meantime, I'll see you in the snake pit. See you next time in the crypto simulation as well. Bye.